Don't leave your mass spec in the past. The thermoscientific Orbitrap Explorers 120 mass spectrometer. Easy to set up your method. Accurate. And reliable.
Therapeutic proteins, such as antibodies, are large complex molecules that selectively bind to sites on receptors or antigens. These proteins are comprised of long, folded amino acid chains. How the amino acid chains are folded have a significant effect on which amino acids are at the surface of the molecule in its three-dimensional structure. Consequently, the 3D structure is critical to how the molecule interacts with other proteins, receptors, or antigens. We can study the 3D or higher order structure of a protein using hydrogen deuterium exchange (HDX) mass spectrometry. Deuterium from heavy water, also called D2O, undergoes a chemical exchange type reaction in which covalently bonded hydrogen atoms are replaced by deuterium atoms without any catalyst, simply by dissolving the protein in heavy water. This is a time-dependent reaction. Consequently, hydrogen atoms exposed on the surface of the protein exchange first. Sections of the protein that have exchanged hydrogen for deuterium will encounter a mass shift, due to deuterium atoms being heavier than hydrogen by about 1 Dalton. We can sample the reaction at different time points, and with that, follow the kinetics of the exchange reaction. The analysis by mass spectrometry is performed on the peptide level that requires the digestion of the protein of interest into peptides. We are able to analyze the peptides before and after labeling. The labeled and unlabeled peptides will be physicochemically identical and will separate at the same time chromatographically. However, when we use high-resolution accurate mass spectrometry, we can detect the mass shift of the deuterium-labeled peptide. This allows the scientist to determine the spatial location of the peptide. This technique enables important studies into drug structure, epitope mapping, and biosimilarity. HDX-MS systems require robust software control, exceptional reproducibility, advanced high-resolution MS capabilities, powerful data processing tools, and expert support. The clever scientists at Thermo Fisher Scientific have a solution. The Thermo Scientific HDX LC-MS workflow brings together exceptional technologies to deliver maximum flexibility and performance. Sample preparation and labeling steps are performed using the HDX PAL Auto Sampler from Leap Technologies. All of the features are available through software control that integrates seamlessly with Thermo Scientific Excalibur software. Exceptional flow precision is delivered using the Thermo Scientific Ultimate NCS 3500 RSLC system, which combines a binary high-pressure gradient pump and a ternary low-pressure microloading pump for absolute experimental control. The HDX PAL and LC modules integrate with any Thermo Scientific Orbitrap-based mass spectrometry system, allowing for a single software control of the entire LC-MS system, giving you choice in experimental features whilst meeting a range of budgets. Flexible software tools are provided which include Biopharma Finder software for peptide mapping, and HD Examiner from Sierra Analytics for interpretation and visualization of deuterium uptake. The Thermo Scientific HDX LC-MS workflow is easy to use, delivers exceptional reproducibility, is future-proof, full-featured and flexible, has a single software control for the LC-MS system, and has expert global technical support.
Jogja itu panas ya, tapi meskipun panasnya Jogja itu nggak kayak panas di kampung kita ya.
Iya, di kampung kita itu udah sepi panas. Nggak ada cewek-ceweknya.
Cewek cantik-cantik, adem pokoknya kalau.
Iya, wah.
Yaudah, fotoin aku lah.
Oke, siap.
Kenapa? Pakai kamera dong, nggak usah pakai
iya.
handphone. buka, jangan lupa.
Oh iya.
Siap. Amat.
Nggak bisa?
Nggak ada baterainya mungkin.
Iya, Boh.
Cek aja dulu. Lah, kok nggak ada baterainya?
Nggak tahu.
Kan aku udah bilang siapin baterainya, kameranya semua.
Ini kan kameramu tadi. Aku kira kamu udah nyiapin.
Ya kan, aku udah masak di kamu suruh nyiapin.
Gimana dong?
Ya terus gimana?
Gimana ya?
Tenang, anak muda. Semua masalah pasti ada solusinya. Saya Kang Rejo, pakar multimedia.
Ada masalah apa? Kameranya.
Baterainya
Nggak ada baterainya.
Minggir. Coba lihat. Keluarin apa? Buka Google. Tulis sewa kamera Jogja. Enter. Nah, yang ini.
Oh ini, ya.
Alat yang kalian cari ada di sini. Udah mulai malam. Saya tunggu di situ.
Ini di sini loh.
Nanti sih, ya udah. Kita udah dapat kameranya. Bedanya kita berangkat.
Ayo.
Tuh, udah sampai kita.
Emangnya itu?
Iya kan, FM rental.
Oh iya.
Mas, selamat malam, mari silakan Kak. Bisa kami bantu? Mau sewa kamera?
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome to the Undergraduate Pharmacy Study Program of Universitas Islam Indonesia. This study program was established in 1998 and in 2019 has been granted accreditation status A from the Indonesian Accreditation Agency for Higher Education in Health. We aim to graduate qualified Bachelor of Pharmacy with Islamic attitude and behavior as added value for the improvement of health services. Our curriculum is designed to develop competencies in pharmaceutical sciences and technology, as well as in clinical, community, and social, behavioral, and administrative pharmacy. We simply formulated our intended graduate profile as precise, in which this precise stands for P for prophetic spirit and characters, and then R for researcher and lifelong learner, and then the first E for entrepreneur, and then C for caregiver, and then I for international orientation, and then S for sensible leader and decision maker, and the last E for effective health communicator and educator. In our undergraduate pharmacy study program, we implement student-centered learning with various learning methods. Through this student-centered learning method, we hope that the students will have great opportunities to participate in the learning process so that it can help the students to achieve the intended learning outcome. The student-centered learning system in our undergraduate pharmacy study program is also supported by sophisticated laboratory facilities to support the teaching and learning process, practical and research, as well as community services and dakwah Islamiyah. Our undergraduate pharmacy study program promotes local wisdom excellences to achieve international recognition, and for that purpose, we develop excellent collaboration both with domestic and overseas institutions, including the Halal Science Center in Thailand, Rangsit University in Thailand, International Islamic University of Malaysia, and the University of Rhode Island in the USA, as well as various health facilities institutions to demonstrate the implementation of qualified education, research, community services, and Da'wah Islamiyah. We, Undergraduate Pharmacy Study Program, is committed to continuous improvement and providing great academic environment for the sake of wellness and well-being of our society, nationally and globally. Undergraduate Pharmacy Study Program, we strive to be precise.
Wabarakatuh. Good morning and welcome to the 4th International Conference on Pharmaceutical Research and Practice 2022. The Honorable Dean of Faculty of Mathematics and Natural Science, Universitas Islam Indonesia, Head of Department of Pharmacy, Chair of this conference, invited speakers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Before we move to the next agenda, let me read brief of the details of the conference that will be started by the opening agenda, opening remarks, keynote session, plenary session, symposium, and the announcement of the door prize winners at the end of this conference. To get the blessing of our program for today, let us hear the recital of Holy Quran, Surah At-Taubah, verse 119 until 122 by Faisal Khalis, student of Undergraduate Pharmacy Batch 2018. To Faisal Khalis, the screen is yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اتقوا الله وكونوا مع الصادقين ما كان لأهل المدينة ومن حولهم من الأعراب أن يتخلفوا عن رسول الله ولا يرغبوا بأنفسهم أنفسهم عن نفسه ذلك بأنهم لا يصيبهم ظمأ ولا نصب ولا مخمصة في سبيل الله ولا يطؤون موطئا يغيظ الكفار ولا ينالون من عدو نيلا إلا كتب لهم به عمل صالح إن الله لا يضيع أجر المحسنين ولا ينفقون نفقة صغيرة ولا كبيرة ولا يقطعون واديا إلا كتب لهم ليجزيهم الله أحسن ما كانوا يعملون وما كان المؤمنون لينفروا كافة فلولا نفر من كل فرقة منهم طائفة ليتفقهوا في الدين ولينذروا قومهم إذا رجعوا إليهم لعلهم يحذرون صدق الله العظيم اللهم ارحمنا بالقرآن والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Thank you, Faisal. Proceed to the next agenda. Now let us hear Indonesian National Anthem and Hymn of Universitas Islam Indonesia. For all of the participants, please stand up. Now, let us see together the Pelangi Nusantara dance performance from Sanggar Langit Alang-Alang. Thank you guys. Once again, let's give one big applause for the wonderful performance from Sanggar Langit Alang-Alang. Next agenda is the report from the chairperson of the Icprp 2022 to Apoteker Hatta Prabowo, M.Sc, Ph.D. The screen is yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, the Honorable Rector of Universitas Islam Indonesia, the Honorable Dean of Faculty of Mathematics and Natural Science, Universitas Islam Indonesia, the Honorable Keynote Speaker, the Honorable Plenary Speakers, the Honorable Symposium Speakers, the Honorable Parallel Speaker, and all distinguished guests, participants of the International Conference on Pharmaceutical Research and Practice 2022. It is such a great pleasure to welcome you to all the International Conference on Pharmaceutical Research and Practice 2022. On behalf of the conference, allow me to deliver several points of the report as follows. The International Conference on Pharmaceutical Research and Practice 2022 is a continuous effort to accommodate exchange of the theories, information, and research among experts of pharmacy, pharmaceutical science, health, and biomedical science. In this year, the committee tried to bring up them about the lessons learned from the COVID-19 pandemic for the improvement of the pharmacy education, research, and practice. We believe that the COVID-19 pandemic accelerated opportunity for new model of the pharmacy education across the world. Interprofessional education become important for the realization of the collaboration therapy management in the practice of health services. In addition, the research to understand and characterize the disease, develop the diagnostic, vaccine, and drug has emerged in response to this pandemic. In this conference, there are several sessions, namely keynote speak, plenary session, symposium session, and parallel session. To expand to the knowledge of all the participants, we invite several international speakers from the USA, UK, France, Malaysia, and also Indonesia. And we believe will bring new insight to the pharmacy education, research, and practice during and post-COVID-19 pandemic. In the parallel session, there are 34 selected participants in total from various institutions in Indonesia, and we ensure a double-blind peer review and clear criteria for abstract acceptance. The selection process makes this conference the best venue to discuss various topics in pharmacy and related topics, among others. Ladies and gentlemen, this conference is the result of hard work, support, and dedication of a number of parties. I would like to express my deepest gratitude to everybody taking a part in this conference, such as participant, presenter, symposium speaker, keynote speaker, committee, the university, sponsor, and also everyone else. And the last but not least, we thank to all the submitter and reviewer who are the backbone of this conference. Thank you for being here with us. We value your presence at this conference. Enjoy the conference. Billahi taufiq wal hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Apoteker Hatta. Next, we would like to invite the head of pharmacy department to deliver the opening remarks and officially open our event for today. To Professor Dr. Apoteker Yani Shukri, M.Sc, the screen is yours.
Okay, thank you, Mbak Anissa. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, dear head of department and study program in the Faculty of Science, Universitas Islam Indonesia, chair of the International Conference on Pharmaceutical Research and Practice Icprp 2022, invite the speakers, scientists, college, and students. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, let us pray and thank God for blessing and good health granted to us as well as the opportunity to join this memorable event, the fourth Icprp 2022. On behalf of the Department of Pharmacy, Faculty of Science, Universitas Islam Indonesia, it's my pleasure to welcome all the participants to this conference. This year, the event is held as a virtual conference due to the recovery situation of the COVID-19 pandemic. However, we hope that the online implementation does not diminish the value and quality of our conference. The plenary lectures by invited speakers, and oral poster presentation will be readily available through the well-balanced program to reflect on the diverse topic of the pharmacy and pharmaceutical sciences. You will be able to explore various pharmaceutical scope, including pharmaceutical chemistry, pharmaceutical biology, pharmaceutic and pharmaceutical technology, pharmacology, toxicology, clinical pharmacy, and social pharmacy. Most of all, it will be a great opportunity for researchers from academia and the pharmaceutical industry to share and discuss the most up-to-date research findings and trends in the dynamic environments. In addition, I hope that the conference provides you with the opportunity for social networking and scholarly interaction with your college. I appreciate organizing chairman committee, Bapak Dr. Muhammad Hatta Prabowo, and all the committee, the speaker, our sponsor, and all participants. I also appreciate to co-organize this event from International Islamic University Malaysia, University Science Malaysia, University of Rhode Island, University of Wolverhampton, University Paul Sabatier, University Mulawarman, and University of Pajajaran. Thank you very much for your kind attention and participation. I hope we can expand our knowledge and networking through our conference. Ladies and gentlemen, finally, by saying Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, I officially declare this the International Conference on Pharmaceutical Research and Practice Icprp 2022 open. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Dr. Yandi. Ladies and gentlemen, that was the end of our welcoming ceremony for the 4th International Conference on Pharmaceutical Research and Practice 2022. Now, we are going to do the photo session. We would like to encourage you all to turn on your camera and don't forget to put on your biggest smile. Okay, are the participants all ready? Okay. Let me count. 3, 2, 1. Okay, next slide. 3, 2, 1. Okay. 3, 2, 1. Okay. 3, 2, 1. Okay, thank you. Okay, now we come to the next agenda of the event, which is the keynote session. The speaker of the keynote session is Professor Dr. Laksono Trisnantoro, M.Sc, Ph.D. Professor Dr. Laksono Trisnantoro, M.Sc, Ph.D. has finished his undergraduate at Gadjah Mada University, and also he took his master at University of York, United Kingdom, and then he completed his doctoral at University of London, United Kingdom, and also he took his postdoctoral at Harvard Medical School, and also completed his title professor at Gadjah Mada University. Professor Dr. Laksono is a special staff of Minister of Resiliency for the Drug and Medical Device Industry from 2021 until now. He also has many awards, and one of them is the Innovator Management Faculty of Medicine Gadjah Mada University in 2011, and 13 books and also 48 publications until now. Professor Dr. Laksono also a director of graduate program in health policy and management Faculty of Medicine, Universitas Gadjah Mada. His recent research and consultation is entitled Strengthening Evidence-Based and Bottom-Up Health Policy and Decision Making, and the client is WHO. Okay, without further ado, I would like to give this session to Professor Dr. Laksono. Screen is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for this invitation for me to speak about COVID-19 and the Indonesian pharmaceutical industry. Lesson learned for resilient health system. My name is Laksono Trisnantoro from Department of Health Policy and Management, Faculty of Medicine, Public Health and Nursing, Universitas Gadjah Mada. So I have 4 parts of my presentations about the impact of COVID-19 pandemic, the painful lessons. And then the second one is pharmaceutical industry during COVID-19. Number 3 is the resilience response, how to transform the system. And then lastly, the implication for pharmaceutical research and development in Indonesia. Okay, so let's start with the first part about the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. And this is painful lessons. So actually, if we look at the pandemic, we have the pre-COVID-19 situations, and then during, and then post. Yeah. So when we look at the pre-COVID-19 at system function, it's about the financing, regulations, human resource development, health service, medical device and pharmaceutical, and also community health education. So we can see that some of the health achievements not optimal. That means our system didn't work well, including we have still high TB prevalence per 100,000 populations. We have problems in hospital bed ratio per 1,000 populations, and we have still maternal mortality rate per 100,000 live births still high. So these are the things that we are not very well. And then also the indicators, if we compare to other countries in Southeast Asia, we also have some bad indicators. So we didn't work well during the pre-COVID-19. And interesting, in this situation, we can see that we have the underfunded pre-COVID-19 health system. The system had been only 3% of GDP that's spent on health, and it was declining from years to years. And we are too much relying on government spending under weak tax collection or tax ratio under 10%. So if you can see here, the blue graph, so this is the GDP increase. It is increased very, very steep. But the tax collection is not increasing well. Yeah. So that means our government has the problems of collecting tax. And that means the central government budget for welfare is not so strong. Okay. But we have opportunity or potential for more funding, because actually when we compare with China, the Chinese they pay about 5% of the GDP for health. So if we use the benchmark of Chinese spending, that means we have still 2% from our GDP can be spent for health. And this is around 300 trillion. It's still, there is a potential for more financing to health system. So, in 2019, there was a big need for reforming health system. Yes, and this is the definition. We try to reform for the sustained, purposeful change to improve the efficiency, equity, and effectiveness of the health sectors. But suddenly the COVID-19 struck in 2020, and this is becoming problematic because the direct impact, we have so many number of cases in 3 waves, and we can see that the most lethal wave is during the Delta variants of COVID-19, July and August last year. So the mortality it was very, very high in the Delta, although we have a very big increase of the Omicron, but the mortality is low. Yes. Okay. Also, we have the crisis of hospital beds, drugs, and many things during the COVID-19 pandemic. Also, we have indirect impact that so many health services disrupted, or suspended. We have many problems of connecting to the hospital or puskesmas or posyandu. So there are many things that the social distance policy makes it is difficult for everybody, for the children to go to the health centers. So this is indirect impact. Also, we have the family economic loss. The urban, they have more severe impact because of COVID. And most families' incomes were negatively affected. So this kind of thing had been written well by Empatica in the UNICEF report in 2021. Now, let's go to the pharma during COVID-19 pandemic. So if you look at the graph, we can see that the waves or the shocks of COVID-19 makes difficulty for forecasting the pharmaceutical supply. And it is well noted that we had a very, very strong dependency on overseas supply, the vaccine therapeutics, including API, and also diagnostics. And it is difficult to forecast. Back to the issue of the COVID-19's medication is not easy because it is a new disease and not so much knowledge can be used for treating COVID-19 patients. So many change of medical regulation for having drug A and then change to drug B and many things that is not stable. And this is becoming problematic. Okay, but overall, the pharma market performance over the past 12 years has been greatly driven by the impact of COVID-19. So this data from IFIA shows that the COVID-19 increased the spending for drugs in the last 2 years. You can see this. Yeah. Although we have the social distance policy, we still consume drugs. Yeah. And the growth is very, very good in the pharmaceutical industry, but mostly for the hospital care and also the non-ethical drugs. Okay. But in a nutshell, if we can see that the COVID-19 and pharmacy industry in Indonesia, we have many lessons that can be learned for this kind of event. So if you look at the industry from the research and development to approval, manufacture, distribution, delivery, and the safety monitoring, so actually Indonesia has not bright history on research and development. This is the thing that we have to be very clear about our past. Our pharmaceutical industry was not a research and development sector that produced many innovations. We have the history of more in using, like when we look at the COVID-19 vaccine from Sinovac, this is the fill and finish activity, not making from the seed into the fill and finish activities. And also, if you look at the API, also imported from various countries during the pandemic, and it is not so good experience because we have to go to India, because India also they have problems in providing their own API during the COVID-19. Yeah. And also the vaccine, actually, we had so many offer from many countries, but still in the development. So when we look at the story about how to procure the vaccines to the big pharma industry like Pfizer or Moderna, so Indonesia is very, very smart. We like procure even before the vaccine has been developed. Okay. So all of these things give more motivation to have resilience in farm industry. So that means Indonesia should go much better, yeah, or strengthen the resilience in the pharma industry. And this is the point that we have to be very clear in terms of our history in pharmaceutical industry. Okay. Okay, now is the part 3 about the resilience response, how to transform the health system. So actually, we have to look at what is the meaning of resilience. That is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. So this is resilience. So during the pandemic, Indonesia has so many positive responses, and it is good for resilience. For example, improve case testing, tracing, and also therapy. Better link between hospital and primary care, awareness of hospital safety in the context of communicable disease, strengthen social system supported by prominent epidemiologists, increase community participation in public and private partnerships, better policy management system for pandemic based on real data. Also, we can look at the more finance for health and pandemic, including family allowances. So because they are frightened of pandemic, okay, so people pay by their own for masks, yeah, even for oxygen generators. Yeah. Oh, sorry, oxygen concentrator. Yes. And then also human resources awareness for safety in works, improving incentive system for health human resources, and then also more use of the state-of-the-art of informatics technology, for example, Peduli Lindungi, and then improvement in digital technology for health service, including telemedicine, biotechnology development, and other research. And for the pharmaceutical industry, we have good experiences in vaccination management using the latest IT technology, so we can track down the vaccine distribution across the country, and then improve domestic industry for medical device and pharmaceutical product for supporting local productions, strengthening research capacity in pharma industry and education, and also increase the investment for vaccine and drug development. So there were so many good experiences that make the resilience becoming faster. Okay. For this resilience, we have to understand about the Ministry of Health strategy in 2021-22. So actually, the president, Pak Jokowi, ordered the minister to have at least 3 main tasks. 1, to accelerate vaccination, 2, to end the pandemic as soon as possible, and 3, to reform health system. So all of the things should be implemented during, we call the so-called process of reformation from like a bad situation of health system to be a good one. So while improving the pre-pandemic health system weaknesses, we have also to make the UHC still going on. The sustained essential health programs will be ensured. So there are many things that should be done in once. This is very, very important. So that's why the reform will be what because like implemented after the vaccination achievement already high, and then also the end of pandemic is also at the moment is becoming like a reality, hopefully. Yeah. So the two missions are already accomplished or maybe almost accomplished. So that's why now we are going to the acceleration in health system reformations. And there's a new word, transformation. It is relatively fast in the process of change. So reform is to make a new form, but transformation is changing from one bad situation into a right or a good one. For example, a caterpillar becoming a butterfly. That's very a good example of transformation. For this purpose, Mr. Ofhead established like a house-like transformation system, in which there are 6 pillars supporting the transformations for achieving the vision of the president to establish a healthy, productive, independent, and equitable society. So this is the vision of president that should be supported by the transformation of health system that consists of 6 pillars. So we can see in more detail and bigger work. One is the primary care transformations, peripheral services, health resilience, health financing, health human resources, and health technology. So pillar number 4, 5, and 6 actually is becoming the foundations of the house to achieve the vision of the president. Okay, if we go to the health resilience number 3, yes, this is number 3, we have to learn from the pandemic experiences. So how to improve domestic industry for medical device and pharmaceutical product. And then how to have a better preparedness from pandemic and how to develop new vaccine, for example, and other things. So these things already learned from the pandemic experiences for the last 2 years. And it is used for transforming into a better health system. And this is the post-pandemic health system that should be better. So if you look at the needs of pharmaceutical development, there are at least there are 5 groups: vaccine, production of 7 antigen and TB vaccine, viral vector and nucleic acid-based technology transfer for vaccine, 6 API from 10 best-selling chemical drugs, biotechnology and plant products, and also herbal medicine, the phytopharmaca. So these are the needs of pharmaceutical development. From this point, then we go to the last part of my presentation about the implication for pharmaceutical research and development. Okay. So when we look at how is the position of research and development in the production of drug or vaccine, it started with research and development here. And then the process is a long and complicated one because we have to have approval from FDA and then manufacture, distribution, delivery, and also safety monitoring. So it may take 12 years of the process making. It is complicated, because it is a human objective and should be have like a safety, not toxic. Again, back to the issue, this is a long process. And that's why there should be like a question about research and development. For what? Yes. So if we look at this graph, actually, at least there are 2 types of research. One is for the journal reports. And then secondly, for the innovative pharmaceutical products. So these are 2 things. The that should be produced from the research and development. And actually, we have to look at what is the example of innovative products, because we cannot only stop at the journal reports. If we stop here, terminate in this process, then we cannot have any innovative product. So that means there is no manufacturing, there is no distribution, and there is no delivery. So the benefit for the society is not there. Okay. Now we have to look at how the process of innovations. And if you look at in this slide, we have about 10 innovations that can improve global health. So this is by McKinsey, and we have the robotics and prosthetics, the next generation of pharmaceuticals, innovative vaccines, and many things. And this is very important issue that I think researchers should understand about the way of doing things in the pharmaceutical industry. First, we have to look at who are the users of our product. It is very important. The have or the have not. So if you look at here, the have, they rich, they can buy our product. But they have not, they are poor. They cannot buy the product. But maybe the government or philanthropy, they are willing to buy the product. And then the government will distribute free to the poor people. So they are the users of our product. So from this classification, at least there are two groups, the commercial innovation and the non-commercial innovations. So in this situation, research and development should understand about the financing resources for health infrastructure and research and development. If we look at the commercial innovations, then we can understand that all of the financing support come from market, not from the government. Yes. And the non-commercial innovations, the resources for financing can be from government funding, public funding, can be philanthropic or international collaborations. But all of these commercial or non-commercial innovations should have business viability. So the company or the pharmaceutical company, they don't make any loss. So they have to have like a business viability for having years for production. So now also there's a mixed funding between commercial from market and also the this public funding, philanthropic or international collaborations. Okay, from this point, then we can understand that when the outcome is of research is limited in journals only, so it is difficult to have innovative pharmaceutical products in Indonesia because back to the issue, the funding is not well planned to be used for every body that needs in the downstream of the process. So it stopped in the academic paper. So this is the danger of the journals only research. So we have to look at the so-called downstreaming of the research and development or hilirisasi. But this kind of thing also having risk that cause value of death, in which the products of the research and development is not attractive for pharma corporations. So it is impossible or it is difficult to have pharma corporation contract for having the rest of the process. Even approval to the FDA should be done by corporations, not university or research agency. Okay. Therefore, I think we have to look at the next strategy or the future strategy for pharmaceutical industry in Indonesia. This is a very important issue that we have to go to innovative products. So there are three strategies: learning the lesson of COVID-19 for international pharma industry. Yes, we have to learn about this, and then head innovations and working together with the government. So strategy number one, 7 key lessons from the pandemic for international pharmaceutical companies. So they have to have some lessons, yeah, that should be done by them for having like extension or development of the market. For example, recognize all limitations, complement strengths through partnerships and downstream collaborations. And then identify and resolve supply chain challenges, building on pilots and developing new ideas. Yes. Embrace innovation in information sharing. And also very important, this is very important, ensure new products quickly reach people in low middle income countries by involving generic medicine manufacturers early in the development process. It's very important for our industry that working in the generic medicine. Invest in a larger network of partners that can quickly ramp up local manufacturing capacity. And then build inventory reserves supported by a large network of API suppliers. And plan for the unexpected, including protectionism. Okay, so these 7 learns for international pharmaceutical industry. Strategy number 2 is creating social impact, innovation plus scaling. So pharmaceutical industry in Indonesia should choose the innovation that provide or give a huge social impact. So the investment, the innovative investment, should be keep in the eye about how to scaling up in the future. So based on the big community needs. So what creates huge impact? What creates impact is focused and committed scaling, which means delivering innovation to more people and doing this more reliably, efficiently, and with ongoing improvements in quality. So we have to look at who are the user, and maybe the number of users, there are thousands, hundreds of thousands, or even millions of people. And then the pathways can be a commercial engagement, okay, through the public sector by incorporating the innovation into the practice of different countries' governments, donors, or philanthropists, or a combine of both. Yeah. So this is the things that we have to look at the community needs. This is written in the head transformation document, and then bring this need upstream to the researcher, government, pharma companies, and financial agencies, and they should work together for producing the new product based on the community needs. So the upstreaming. Okay, and then strategy number 3 is working with government and trying to tap government-funded vaccine research for, this is for example, basic research investments, preclinical investment and scientific risk, human testing risk led to safety and efficacy, and also manufacturing investment and risk and market risk. So we can look at the US experiences. You can see in this PowerPoint, you can have this after this presentation, the basic research investment. So the government provides protection, include the market risk. So this is like an extreme example that the government also protect the industry by procurement insurance. So they ensure that their product will be procured by the government. Like Johnson & Johnson had a 1 billion contract for 100 million doses of their vaccine. Even Pfizer, they have also a contract totaling almost 5.97 billion for 300 million doses. So the government plays a big role in the vaccine development. Otherwise, the research and development only stay in the journals. Closing. So COVID-19 pandemic gives painful lessons. Pharmaceutical industry during COVID-19 suffered from many problems, especially the dependency of imported API, drugs, and vaccines. Transforming the system is a chosen strategy, include the pharmaceutical and medical device industry. And then there are many implications for pharmaceutical research and development based on COVID-19 experiences, including strengthening research and development, and then public and private partnership, and using needs-based analysis for prioritizing the product items. I think this is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Plenary lecture will discuss about the effective strategies improving the use of antibiotics in healthcare facilities, which will be presented by Dr. Dzul Azri Mohamed Noor from University Science Malaysia. The chair for this plenary lectures is Dr. Apotheker Rohmi Istiqoroh M.Sc. Dr. Rohmi finished her graduate and apothecary program at Gajah Mada University. She completed her master from Mahidol University, Thailand, and received her doctoral program from Gajah Mada University. Since 2005, Dr. Rohmi is a lecturer in the Department of Pharmacy, Universitas Islam Indonesia. She is also doing some research in the field of biochemistry, pharmacogenetics, and mechanism activities of natural product development. To Dr. Rohmi, the screen is yours.
Thank you for the MC for the introduction. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the plenary session, and I'm Rohmi Istiqoroh, your moderator for this session. We have two invited lecturers with us for this session, Professor Kerry LaPlante and Dr. Dzul Azri Mohamed Noor. Thank you very much for your willingness to join into this conference. The lecture will take 40 minutes for each speaker, and after that, we will have a discussion for about 20 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, our first panelist is Professor Kerry LaPlante from University of Rhode Island. Please allow me to read the short biography of our distinguished speaker. Yes. Professor LaPlante is a department chairperson and professor at the University of Rhode Island College of Pharmacy. She is also a director of several programs. As a licensed clinical pharmacist, Professor LaPlante is an internationally recognized expert on antibiotics use, antimicrobial resistance, and health policy implementation. She has published over 120 peer-reviewed research articles and received funding with over 30 successfully awarded grants, totally over 20 million from the National Institute of Health and other fundings. Currently, Professor LaPlante is a vice president at Making a Difference in Infectious Diseases and an associate editor for Clinical Infectious Diseases. She has also published a book titled Antimicrobial Stewardship Principles and Practices. What amazing curriculum vitae, Professor. So without any further delay, please welcome our lecturer, Professor LaPlante, with the topic COVID-19 and antibiotic resistances. Professor LaPlante, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen.
Yes.
I think it's disabled. While you're disabling the participants' screen sharing, I just want to say, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for this invitation. And on behalf of all of the faculty and staff at the University of Rhode Island College of Pharmacy, we send you our best wishes and good health. And thank you. So,
thank you, Professor. Will you be able to share the screen? Have you?
I'm not able to do that. I am trying.
Please
now. Now, yes, thank you. All right. So here we go. And here we go to the beginning. I was looking at my slides and practicing. Sorry. Okay. There we are. Thank you. All right. Today, I'm going to talk about the challenges and impact of antimicrobial resistance since the COVID-19 outbreak. My disclosures, the information disseminated in my lecture today is given in my personal capacity and not necessarily in my capacity as a government employee. It does not reflect the views of the United States Department of Veterans Affairs or the Rhode Island Department of Health. And this is given as an encore presentation for Making a Difference of Infectious Diseases Conference. So today, I'm going to discuss three main objectives. Describe how antimicrobial stewardship, how we all steward appropriate use of antibiotics, has changed since the COVID pandemic began. I want to describe how access and restrictions in healthcare and pharmacy to the COVID-related treatments for our patient has affected our patient care. But as the speaker said in the beginning, there's certainly a silver lining and so many opportunities in pharmacy since this COVID pandemic happened, from diagnostics and vaccines and treatment. And lastly, I'll just refer to the guidelines and protocols to improve the care that we give our patients for COVID-19. So first, we want to do no harm. We want to protect our patients that have COVID. We want to protect them from having secondary infections, and we want to prevent overuse of antibiotics. Together, as a globe, across the world, we want to preserve a shared resource of antibiotics. So I always want to start with why, and I know that all of my colleagues and friends here at this meeting know that antibiotics are a shared resource for all of us, and they are now a scarce resource. We know that antibiotic use increased in the early days of COVID. Providers and physicians were uncertain how sick our patients would get. And in these moments where patients were dying and we didn't know what to do, there was a tendency to give antibiotics in case there was a secondary pneumonia or a secondary infection. But we all know that antibiotics are essential to our patients' safety. We know that there's highest rates of antibiotic use in older adults. And we know that antibiotics do not treat viral illnesses like COVID or influenza or the common cold. So my goal always throughout my career is to increase the number of antibiotic stewards and champions, not only in Rhode Island, in the United States, and throughout the world. And sometimes our patients don't know why. They want an antibiotic, they want to feel better. And some of the recent conversations that I can have with our patients is reminding them of our full microbiome, that we are covered with bacteria on the outside and inside of our body. And bacteria have been around for at least 3.5 billion years. And humans have only been around for a very, very short amount of time compared to that 3.5 billion years that bacteria have been around. So we all know the discovery of penicillin, I will say arguably one of the greatest discoveries in medicine. It happened at St. Mary's Hospital in London in 1928. A then 47-year-old Alexander Fleming observed that a culture of Staphylococcus bacteria was contaminating his penicillium mold that he had in his lab. And when he got back from his holiday, they say in the month of August, he came back, he had his staph bacteria in his petri dish, and he noticed these blue-green mold colonies with zones of inhibition. And something in this mold, which we then learned was the penicillium, was killing the staph. He knew then that if he worked together with chemists and many other colleagues, that you can harness and collect all of those antibacterials, put them together and start using them in our patients, and hence the discovery of antibiotics. We thought we were in a really good place in the 1940s and 50s. And then shortly thereafter, in 1969, when the first vaccine was discovered against smallpox, we believed back then it was time to close the book on infectious diseases. We now had antibiotics, we now have viruses. Hopefully, infectious diseases are a thing of the past. But we all know, unfortunately, that is not the case. We have some data here on how effective antibiotics have been across all of modern medicine. You see here on the left side, this was the United States infection death rate per 100,000 population prior to the discovery of the antibiotic penicillin, quite high through the 40s, 60s, and 80s. And when you combine all other medical technologies, they reduced death by around 20 per 100,000 over the next 45 years, where antibiotics decreased death by around 220 per 100,000 in just 15 years. So I think we can all agree that antibiotics has been perhaps one of the greatest discoveries in certainly our lifetimes, perhaps all of humankind. The power of antibiotics are great, as we know. We also have data here showing death rate before antibiotics for community-acquired pneumonia. It was around 35%. If you had a pneumonia from the community, chances of death, maybe 3 to 4 out of every 10 persons. After the discovery of antibiotics, really only 1 out of 10 people. Hospital pneumonia data here, a little bit higher. Heart valve infections like infective endocarditis, about 100% death rate. After antibiotic use, around 25%. Brain infections like a meningitis, also quite high, significantly decreased from antibiotics, and skin infections. And we like to say, with all due respect to our cardiology colleagues, by comparison, even the treatment of myocardial infarctions with aspirin or streptokinase has only decreased death rates by 3%. So we like to kind of push our agenda on the importance of antibiotics and preserving them appropriately here. But as Sir Alexander Fleming knew right after he won the Nobel Prize for the discovery of antibiotics, in 1945, he said, and I have to read to not misquote him, "The microbes are educated to resist penicillin, and a host of penicillin-fast organisms is bred out." He's referring to resistance that happened very quickly. In such cases, the thoughtless person playing with penicillin and not dosing it or using it correctly is morally responsible for the death of the man who finally succumbs to the infection with the penicillin-resistant organism. And he said, "I hope this evil can be averted." And we all know that when we give antibiotics, there is a selection for a population of the resistant strains that can come out. We have high inocular infections like pneumonias, for example, 10 to the 9th colony. And when you give antibiotics, it can certainly kill many of the bacteria, but then also resistant strains can overpopulate and become dominant. We know that there has been a steady decline in new antibiotics. There were 50 to 60 antibiotics coming out each decade. And then right after the HIV epidemic, we were seeing a significant decrease as the energy and efforts were focused, appropriately so, on the HIV pandemic. We then started seeing a significantly decrease in the number of antimicrobials, at least here in the United States. At that time, there was a call to action from the Infectious Diseases Society of America saying we need to focus on making more antibiotics. We are running out, and the bacteria are replicating and mutating at a rate that is much faster than the rate that we can develop new antibiotics. So we all know antibiotics are misused in a variety of ways. They were given when they're not needed for viral infections or for colonization. They're continued when they're no longer necessary. They can be given at the wrong dose. Sometimes we use overly broad spectrum agents to treat very susceptible bacteria, and sometimes we select the wrong antibiotic to treat this infection. And it's been recognized for several decades, at least here in the United States, that up to 50% of antimicrobial use is inappropriate. We see that in our outpatient settings, we see that in our acute care hospital settings, and we see that in our long-term care settings where we care for our older adults in certain home settings. And we know that the consequences of resistance is quite high. It causes increased death, increased sickness, and increased healthcare costs. And most importantly, and why we're here today, is to know that antibiotics do not work on the COVID-19 SARS-CoV-2 virus. It is a virus, but we also understand that our providers want to do everything they can for their patients that are sick with COVID, and we worry that there are secondary infections in patients who do have COVID-19. So let's turn our conversation to talk more about antimicrobial stewardship and the COVID-19 pandemic. So how has stewardship changed? Now, here in the United States, in every single hospital, there's around 5,000 hospitals here in the United States. Each and every hospital for accreditation needs to have an antimicrobial steward, one named champion in each hospital that is in charge and is responsible for monitoring, tracking, reporting, and educating on the appropriate use of antibiotics. And we have been doing a very good job in the United States since that requirement came out in 2016. But during the COVID pandemic, we all had to shift, us champions of stewardship, had to shift our focus away to our traditional antimicrobial stewardship initiatives. We had to focus on our patients. Pharmacy services had decreased access to antimicrobials and a lot of medications. The number of laboratory cultures taken were decreased because we weren't able to go in and see the patients and take the respiratory cultures or the urine cultures and the blood cultures. There was less staff. Staff were sick with COVID-19. And because everyone was focused on the pandemic, we worried that there was a lot more infection control concerns, and perhaps people were using antibiotics inappropriately. One good thing that happened, one of many good things to be positive that happened with the COVID-19 pandemic, is that we had more interdisciplinary communications. A lot of our pharmacists and nurses and social workers and physicians worked together to try and do the best we could for our very sick patients without a lot of knowledge of how to treat these infections. I turn to bring in the importance of implementation science. We know that when we want to change the behavior or create a more stewardship environment, or even during the COVID-19 pandemic when we didn't know how exactly to treat our patients, we know that traditionally it can take up to 17 years for only a small amount of published evidence literature to translate into practice. Once those national guidelines are published, really in any area of cardiology, pediatrics, oncology, though our oncology colleagues seem to be a little bit faster about the uptake of evidence-based medicine, it can take 17 years for this to be taken up. Of interest during the COVID-19 pandemic, we were quickly reading articles. The National Institutes of Health and the WHO was quickly putting out the information as fast as they could. And us practitioners and those of you that are at this meeting who are caring for these very sick patients knew that every night you would come home and read more and see what you can do to help your patients. We really narrowed the timeline of implementation science during the COVID-19 pandemic. And I use this figure really just to describe our stewardship practices before March of 2020, when the SARS-CoV-2 virus hit us hard. We were moving along nicely, just like traffic. but also during the COVID-19 pandemic, everyone was going in different directions. So we were all researching things and looking at things different. Our physicians would read one thing, our pharmacists would read another. We would talk to our friends at different universities. No one really knew exactly what to do. So what we did at our hospital settings, and certainly in Rhode Island, is got together and create policies, procedures, and protocols and guidelines to do everything we could to try and make sure we were improving the treatment of our patients who had COVID-19. And we knew that even during all of the chaos of treating our patients in those early years, we still had to go through the stages of behavior change with some of our providers, just like we did with antimicrobial stewardship. We had, and I'll walk through briefly for you the stages of behavior change when you have, as a pharmacist who's trying to perhaps change the behavior of another provider who's caring for their patients. And I have information to say that maybe this antibiotic is not the best for the patient, but the provider believes that it is. And I want to graciously educate them and do what I can as someone who is an expert in medication safety and efficacy to communicate with my colleagues on when it is appropriate and not appropriate to use antibiotics for these very sick patients. So we talk about the stages of behavior change often so we can be effective in our communications and our narratives and messaging. And we know that that first stage, really like any behavior change, certainly for my own, there's that pre-contemplation stage. You're unaware that that's a problem, that maybe you're using antibiotics inappropriately. You can be using them for a viral illness, a viral respiratory illness. And you want to raise awareness through reflection. You want to ask open-ended questions to your provider. What made you think that an antibiotic would be effective? Then they may contemplate, they may be aware of the problem, and they may have a desire to change the behavior. And you can do that through providing lectures, giving more education, sharing guidelines. And then in the preparation stage, that's when they are more likely to listen to key opinion leaders and interactive cases, other skill development. They then become motivated. There's incentives. They can get peer feedback. We give report cards. And then, of course, we want to maintain that behavior change through reinforcement and repetition. And back to when we were talking about the COVID-19 pandemic, we did a poll on Twitter with our Society of Infectious Diseases pharmacists and realized that all the efforts and energy, at least of our pharmacy colleagues, were really going towards this pandemic. This was before we had vaccines. This is before we had antivirals, any monoclonal antibodies. We were just trying to figure out what was the best thing we could do for our patients. So we had leadership support. Everyone was very busy, but we didn't have a lot of resources. We didn't have a lot of space. We didn't have a lot of time. Personnel were often getting sick. We were leaning more and more on technology and really just trying to find the best balance of all the resources for our stewardship program, while really our efforts and energy were focused on the COVID pandemic. Again, those challenges and the barriers where we had decreased personnel and decreased time, but some of the silver linings in those early days, we were leaning more on technology. It was nice being an infectious diseases specialist in pharmacy and having a lot more, focus on infectious diseases and the importance of preventing infections. And of course, we developed a lot of closer relationships as we were all working so hard together. And again, these barriers, we had diagnostic uncertainty. We were not able to get as many cultures from our patients. It was a brand new disease. We didn't know what we were doing. We didn't know necessarily how to diagnose. And again, the personnel shifts were a concern. So all of this buildup what was happening with antibiotic resistance and antibiotic use during the COVID-19 pandemic. And this is data that was presented by the CDC from my colleague here, given with permission, from the National Healthcare Safety Network. And this is what we found. So the key takeaways is that healthcare infection control is certainly critical to fighting antimicrobial resistance in the COVID-19 pandemic. We have to have good infection control, good personal protective equipment. We need to protect our patients and do the best we can. And we learned early on that there was no clear evidence that patients with COVID-19 were more susceptible to bacterial or fungal infections. That was happening at a similar frequency as patients with influenza-like illness. However, there were reports, and I'll show on a future slide, of sporadic outbreaks of antimicrobial resistance during the COVID-19 pandemic in certain units, and higher rates of hospital onset infections were being reported. So we know that COVID-19 can create this perfect storm for antimicrobial resistance because these patients are staying in the hospital a lot longer. There's staff shortages, there's antibiotic use challenges, and there's challenges in implementing good infection prevention and control. So some preliminary analyses identified increased hospital onset infections, some methicillin-resistant Staph aureus. And we know that, again, lab testing, due to supply issues and access to our patients, caused some additional challenge. So we knew that we needed to have continued importance on healthcare infection control, and we want to protect our patients with COVID from having these secondary bacterial infections. Two of the big outbreaks, there were many, about 20 overall, but one was in the United States in New Jersey. There were 34 cases of a carbapenem-resistant Enterobacteriaceae, or crab organisms, due to changes in infection prevention and control. And then in Florida, there were 39 cases of Candida auris, a very drug-resistant Candida strain, and that was due to unconventional PPE practices, because if you recall at the time, we were very short on personal protective equipment. We didn't have masks. We were reusing them and saving them. Fortunately, at least here in the United States, we're not seeing as much of a shortage, if at all, on PPEs. So the outbreaks did resolve after the surge, but the long-term impact on the spread of these new antimicrobial resistance pathogens is always concerning. So the CDC looked at our 3 different hospital settings, healthcare settings. One hospital, there was lots of variability. Some hospitals had a lot of antibiotic use, some not so much. Outpatient setting, there was a significant drop in antibiotic prescribing. That is because patients were not going to see their doctors or their primary care providers because many of the doctors' offices were closed. So we did see a significant drop in antibiotic prescribing. But here in the United States, a lot of our patients live in assisted living together in nursing homes. They were crowded, and we had a lot of COVID outbreaks. And that is where we were very concerned, because a lot of times these are very frail, older adults with a lot of sickness and comorbidity. So the providers wanted to do the best they could for the residents that live in these nursing homes. And that is where we saw a lot of spikes and increase in antibiotic use. So we looked at the data across, in the hospital setting, 150 hospitals, 14,000 discharged across the CDC's NHSN and the Premier Healthcare database. Outpatient, we looked at national estimates extrapolated from 92 different retail prescriptions. And then, of course, the nursing home data, this data was provided by Pharm America that represented almost 2,000 US nursing homes. The CDC compared COVID-19 to influenza-like illness, not saying that COVID was like influenza, but they were both viruses. They both had patients admitted with a length of stay. It was a similar infection type in that they were just viruses. They wanted to look at antibiotic use, and they wanted to look at antibiotic resistance. So as I said, we don't want to say that the flu and COVID-19 is the same exactly, but this was before we had the vaccine for COVID-19. So we knew that those patients were quite sick, but the CDC needed a comparison. So they looked at patient discharge data for flu and COVID-19. There were some similarities, but we were seeing, again, this is before the vaccine, that there was a longer length of stay for patients with COVID-19. And we see that discharges with bacterial fungal cultures obtained in influenza, flu-like illness, was around 55% and similar with COVID. But when it came to antibiotic resistance, around 12 and 9%. So here's all the data that the CDC has. It's on the CDC website. And what the big picture you're seeing from 2019 compared to 2020 is overall there was not a significant change in antibiotic use. The trend lines there, you see it going down a little bit in March and April, and that represents a decrease in hospitalizations because here in the United States, because of COVID, we were not doing any of the traditional surgeries or elective surgeries or many of the procedures that we were traditionally doing because we had to divert our resources for our patients who had COVID. We did look at azithromycin because I don't know how things were in Indonesia, but we had concerns early on or beliefs early on that azithromycin may have activity against COVID. So we did see a spike in azithromycin use, but that spike went down shortly after our providers learned that azithromycin was not an effective treatment for COVID. And I would be remiss to not mention why they thought that at the time. And that was because azithromycin did have some in vitro activity against SARS-CoV-2. It acts at different different points in the viral cycle. There are some immunomodulatory properties. They can downregulate cytokine production. And of course, azithromycin use is associated with a reduction in mortality and ventilator days and other viral infections. But we knew that that was not an option for our patients with COVID, but at least it allowed us to understand why there was an original tick up of azithromycin use in the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic. Also in the hospitals, another common antibiotic is ceftriaxone. We use it for community-acquired pneumonia. It's a third generation cephalosporin beta-lactam antibiotic for the non-infectious diseases specialists in here. And we did see similar trends. We see an uptick early on when we weren't sure what we were dealing with this infection, but overall, we did not see a significant increase. Good news also is we did not see a significant increase in carbapenem use or fluoroquinolone use during that time. The hospitals did a really good job not overusing antibiotics. Outpatients, again, we're looking at overall prescription trends in outpatient settings because 80% of all antibiotic use, at least here in the United States, is outpatient, not inpatient. And we saw that decrease, that dip down that you see on the right-hand side of our screen during the COVID pandemic. And that was really just because there was a decrease in outpatient visits because patients were not going to see their providers or their physicians. This looked at trends from 18, 19, and 20, and you can see that very impressive decrease in antibiotic use in 2020. And again, azithromycin use. We saw a peak early on, just like we were seeing it in the hospital settings, and then it significantly decreased. What about in our nursing homes? This is where we did see a trend, an increase of antibiotic use. So this slide here shows nursing home antibiotic dispensing rates. We did in 2019 through 20 about a 9% decrease in all antibiotics, but you will note here that the total number of residents on that second line, set of lines there, were decreasing because so many of our residents living in these nursing home settings were passing away from COVID. So the number of residents in nursing home settings were decreasing due to outbreaks of the COVID-19. And we were seeing an increased antibiotic use, but when azithromycin was excluded, then antibiotic use was lower in 2020 compared to 2019. So again, we overall saw an increase, but when we accounted for azithromycin, overall antibiotic use was a decrease. So in the end, very proud of the work of our providers on not overprescribing antibiotics. We understand in the early days it was concerning. We see this spike in azithromycin use in April, March, April, and May. It went down and back up, but overall, at least here in the United States, we report that we did a very good job of not overusing antibiotics. So the future implications of antimicrobial resistance in COVID-19, we still want to do a good job with infection prevention and control. We want to support greater resiliency, as our previous speaker talked about. But this is resiliency in antibiotic resistance and antibiotic use programs. And we want to continue to gather more data to make sure that we weren't missing anything. Lastly, I just want to talk about the access to medications during this pandemic. And I don't know how much of a problem it was to you, my friends, in Indonesia, as it could be here in the United States at times. The access to a lot of medications, steroids, vasopressors, and antibiotics, there was a shortage in the medical supply chain, whether it be from the manufacturers just weren't making these drugs, the wholesalers or distributors where we're getting the medications from were having difficulties. They were shut down or having their own COVID outbreaks. Retail settings were having a hard time dispensing it. Same problems in mail order pharmacies that we have here. Hospitals, some hospitals were over ordering. I had colleagues wake up at midnight and order and just over order some medications so they had it in their hospital. And of course, what that did is take away medications from other colleagues in other hospitals. Nursing homes were doing the same, so were prisons and clinic settings. So access was a problem. The World Health Organization came out and they, just like they have in the past, they wanted to make sure any barriers to access of medication was not going to happen. So patients can continue to be treated with all the medication that we can give appropriately so. So those delays were due to decreased personnel, as I mentioned, and the work of the doctors, nurses, and pharmacists and healthcare providers who want to provide that life-saving treatment could do so and keep that medication accessible and affordable at all times for people who need that. And we wanted to avoid the stockpiling of medications. So to do this, the World Health Organization came out with guidance at a government level to develop a list of essential medications, preventing stockpiling of drug shortages, allocating specific products including antibiotics, antivirals, and respiratory medications, restricting the retail dispensing of essential medications to only a 30-day emergency supply, not 90 days or not 6 months, and also trying from a financial standpoint here in the States, we were waiving some of the payments of medications, especially for low-income individuals. So it was critical that the government and the wholesalers work together cooperatively to ensure that no country, no region, no district, no city, and no patient is left behind. And I applaud the WHO for those efforts. And lastly, as my time is coming to a close here, I think most of us know, and during those early days in treating patients with COVID and working with our colleagues, we were very grateful for the treatment guidance that came out from the National Institutes of Health here in America and the Infectious Diseases Society of America. They both did a fantastic job having these guidelines up to date in real time, not just one paper published as a PDF, but keeping the websites active and updating them frequently as all of the information was coming out. So with that, I conclude my presentation and I will turn this back over to our moderator. Thank you.
Okay, that is remarkable, interesting, Professor. Thank you very much. I believe that there are many talks for discussion, but we have to wait until the discussion session. For the audience, I remind you that you may write your question on the chat box, or you may ask during the discussion session. The next speaker is Dr. Dzul Azri Mohamed Noor from University Science Malaysia. Please allow me to read the short biography of our speaker. Dr. Dzul Azri Mohamed Noor finished his undergraduate and master degree at University Science Malaysia, then received his doctoral degree from University of Nottingham. He teaches in the field of clinical pharmacy and pharmacogenomics. Currently, Dr. Mohamed Noor is the program chair in the discipline of clinical pharmacy at University Science Malaysia. His completed grants determining ibuprofen efficacy and its predictors for patent ductus arteriosus among neonates in Malaysia Tertiary Hospital. His current research is entitled Genetic Influence in Carbamazepine Response among Saudi Arabia population, and until now he has 26 publications. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our lecturer, Dr. Mohamed Noor, with the topic Effective Strategies Improving the Use of Antibiotics in Healthcare Facilities. Dr. Mohamed Noor, the time is yours. Okay, Doctor, would you mind to share your slide by yourself, or our team will assist you?
I'll share my slide. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, clearly, Doctor.
Yeah. All right. Okay.
Yes, you may start your talk, Dr. Mohamed Noor.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you very much. Sorry about just now. Maybe I'll better switch off my video first, just in case of the line. Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson, for the introduction just now. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the committee for inviting me to this session. And I would like to congratulate the committee for organizing such a conference and wish you a success for the whole event. So today I was given a topic about the effective strategies to improve antibiotic use in healthcare facilities. Okay, so my slides will touch on the current situation with the antibiotic utilization, followed by the strategies and plan that can be used to improve the usage of antibiotics. Okay. So we have known for some time now the increasing use of antibiotics, and these increasing trends of antibiotic consumption has been translated has shown an increasing trend, right? So, and then based on client study, when they look into the antibiotic consumption for the past 15 years in 76 countries, they show that there is 65% increase in a global antibiotic consumption, while the antibiotic consumption rate increased from 11.3 to 15.7 defined daily doses per 1,000 inhabitants per day, which is translate into 39% increase over the study period. And the antibiotic consumption's rate of broad spectrum antibiotics has been shown to be increased for up to 36%. And this antibiotic consumption rate of the cephalosporin, quinolones, and macrolides also shows some increasing trend between 12 to 20% of the total defined daily doses. And if this trend is maintained, if there is any changes to the policies and this antibiotic consumption rates becoming more constant, then it is predicted by 2030 there will be an increase of further 15% in the antibiotic consumption. So by increasing the use of antibiotics, we have seen a translation into the emergence of antimicrobial resistant bacteria. Okay, a recent study by the Center of Disease Dynamics, Economy and Policy showed that Acinetobacter baumannii and Klebsiella pneumonia are among the one with high rates of resistance, while Enterococcus faecium was found to have the highest rate of resistance to broad-spectrum penicillin. Okay, there also has been reported an increase in rate of resistance towards gabapentin among gram-negative pathogens that are encoded by many genes such as NDM1, QPC, and VIM. And what is more worrying for us is the emergence of bacteria with plasmid-mediated genes that are resistant to colistin, which is the last resort. What we are considered as the last resort antibiotics. So that shows the current situations worldwide. Okay, so given the alarming rate of antimicrobial resistance, Global Action Plan was set up with 5 strategies to combat antimicrobial resistance. And one of the tools is Antimicrobial Stewardship Program, which is aimed to achieve the 4th strategy of the Global Action Plan, which is to optimize the use of antimicrobial medicines in human and animals. So antimicrobial stewardship, or AMS, or always also known as AMS, it offers a multiple action plan that can be applied at any level. So while these plans offer flexibility to healthcare facilities to choose which one that suits them, it requires a lot of commitments and cooperation between the hospital management, AMS team, and other healthcare professionals. Right, like any other program or initiatives, its efficacy depends on the commitment and cooperation of those involved either directly or indirectly to the program. Thus, I think it is crucial to ensure the continuous cycle of the activities plan, right? So we need to engage with the stakeholders when we want to devise a AMS program in our healthcare facilities. And this engagement should look into the SWOT analysis, where we look into our strength, weakness, opportunities, and threat based on the checklist of healthcare facility core elements to identify what are the existing and missing elements that can and possible enablers and barriers to implementations of AMS program. It is also essential to have governance structures. So where we need like identify the human resources that have a different function and able to effectively implement the healthcare facility AMS program. This structure may vary in size and complexity, but most importantly, it needs to identify the responsibility and accountability of the hospital management and those who are coordinate and implement the AMS program. The plan and activities should also be discussed among stakeholders to identify barriers and find ways to overcome them before we implement the activities. And this will ensure the commitment of the department involved. The situational and or SWOT analysis will help the healthcare facility in developing a stepwise AMS action that can identify what is already in place. That means the core elements of the healthcare facility and what need to put in place over time, whether in the short or long-term priorities. We also need to identify the human resources needed. What are the available human resources we have in the healthcare facilities? Do we need additional expertise to be included in the AMS team? The composition of the AMS team and other core elements, including the guidelines, our antibiotic usage and resistance data of the healthcare facility. And we also need to make sure the AMS activities in line with the presence of facilities in the hospital. So basically, in terms of the human resources, usually for AMS team, we need a leader. So this leader can be either physicians, pharmacists, or nurses, as long as they are able to champion the cause of antimicrobial stewardship, and they are able to delegate and oversees all the program or activities planned by the committee. And usually we also involve physicians, especially ID physicians, and also clinical pharmacists or ID pharmacists. It can also involve nurses, and others, healthcare professional or other staff like microbiologists and other ward pharmacists and other nurses in the ward as well. If, let's say, the healthcare facilities are not able to have enough team members, the other way they can do it is by having somebody else from other centers or other hospitals that are experienced enough in antimicrobial stewardships and able to help throughout the activities and program. Right. So next, we need to devise the plan and activities that are in line with the hospital facilities, hospital core elements. Okay. So as I mentioned previously, AMS program offers multiple plans that can be implemented based on any level of hospital healthcare facilities. Thus, each healthcare facilities may want to sit down and look back at each plan and see which one that can be started first and which one can be started later, right? So the three most common interventions or plans involve educations, audit and feedback, and restriction interventions. There are also in the guidelines, there are also structural interventions, which I will leave it for the moment, all right? So in terms of education, it can be either formal or informal teaching and training to engage prescribers and other healthcare workers to improve antibiotic prescribing, dispensing, and administration practice. Education also involves the use of the treatment guidelines, which is the healthcare facility recommendations for common infection syndrome. Next, audit and feedback refers to the assessment of prescribed antibiotic treatment with feedback on antibiotic treatment considered as inappropriate. And restrictions and intervention involve restricting dispensing of targeted antibiotics on the hospital formularies according to approved criteria. For instance, can be prescribed by certain specialists or certain departments. So educational intervention can involve educational meeting, which can be like a basis for antibiotic use, case-based discussion, event analysis, lectures on specific topics related to AMS and infectious disease. It also can be involved distributions of and training material, such as clinical practice guidelines, evidence-based medicines, academic detailing, and etc. There are also reminders that can be given either verbally or inverbally or electronically to inform the healthcare workers about the changes or the current activities that need to be adhered by the healthcare workers. With the advance of technology, education can also involve e-learning resources, whereby the healthcare workers can be trained through online platform. And we can also give continuous medical educations to our healthcare workers, to our physicians, in terms of updated informations and the current plan by the AMS team. So studies have shown that using systematic review and meta-analysis, in one of studies, they're using a systematic review of 52 studies, which combines the randomized control trials and also non-randomized series. And they, among interventions identified from that studies is like education interventions such as dissemination of materials and academic detailing, whereby the pharmacist in charge give like a briefing or like short information extracted evidence-based medicine or guideline to inform and update the physicians about the current practices. And some of the studies, they also use combination of educations and audit and feedback as the interventions. So in these pharmacist-led interventions, it has shown that it can reduce the duration of antimicrobial therapy based on the education given. And another meta-analysis looking into the multidisciplinary approach, whereby the interventions include group meeting, academic detailing, educational training, guideline development and disseminations, and it was found that it can decrease the general practitioners' antibiotic prescription rate, whereas GP educations, academic detailing, and workshop training was found to be effective in increasing the antibiotic prescription adherence rate. Audit and feedback is meant to assess appropriateness of prescribed antibiotics for all inpatients or a group of patients in certain department. So this audit and feedback can be either prospective or retrospective. But the best approach is to give a prospective audit and feedback because of the real-time feedback and real-time interventions. This feedback can be through audit with feedback to prescribers during the prescriptions given by the prescribers. It can also be real-time feedback during ward rounds with the AMS team, and also real-time feedback during handover between shifts. It can also be audit and feedback in terms of the local consensus for changes in antibiotic treatment. So during this audit and feedback, the issues that need to be considered such as redundant therapy, the suitability or appropriateness of the antibiotics prescribed in terms of the compliance with guideline and the microbiology test results, the dose optimizations, IV to oral switch, and the durations. So as I mentioned previously, elements of audit involve data collections at baseline and follow-up for retrospective audit, whereas for prospective audits, they're looking more in the adherence to guideline using a predetermined criteria such as that I mentioned just now in terms of the antibiotic selections, the dose optimizations, IV to oral switch, etc. Okay, and during this prospective audit, any deviations should be communicated, and the reason behind this deviation should be documented. So example of interventions that can be done during this audit and feedback process is review of antibiotic therapy in terms of selections, whether there is any redundancy, whether it is appropriate based on the microbiology test, the dose and the durations of the antibiotics given. The intervention can also be on the antibiotic de-escalations, whereby once the microbiology results came in, then the pharmacist can start, or the MS team can start to intervene in terms of whether they want to de-escalate or escalate the antibiotic therapy. And they also, intervention includes switching from IV antibiotics to oral antibiotics. And Daniel et al. In their studies shows that audit and feedback strategies manage to decrease antibiotic use in uncomplicated acute respiratory infections and also improve guideline adherence, but it has no impact on the total antimicrobial rate. Given that this is a retrospective studies, so this might affect the findings of the study as well. Try et al. Study also is a retrospective studies that compared antibiotic prescribing for UTI and SSDI before and after implementation of pharmacist lab audits and feedback strategies. And they found that implementations of the audit and feedback strategies able to improve the rate of antibiotic prescribing appropriateness significantly, but not on other outcomes such as adverse event and treatment failures. Next strategies that we can use is restriction interventions. So as I mentioned before, restrictions on antibiotics are by diagnosis or units, and selection of restricted antibiotics is done by facility authorities, the MS team, the head of units, based on the spectrum, cost and toxicities. There are some restrictions whereby the antibiotics are restricted before use. That means physician need to apply for approval before initiating the therapy. Practical approach that allow attending physician to use the drug can be approved by physician or MS team after 48 hours can be also considered as formulary restriction interventions. Automatic stop dates refers to automatically stopping the dates for an antibiotic orders when the duration is not specified, and this is to ensure the antibiotics are continued no longer than necessary. Whereas delayed antibiotic prescribing is a useful strategy to be used to help reduce antibiotic use, especially during consultation when patients expect to receive an antibiotic prescriptions. So Kirk et al. In their 5-year retrospective study showed that formulary restriction and pre-authorization approval showed a significant decrease in trend of prescribing restricted agent. Whereas a systemic literature review showed that antimicrobial restriction may help in preventing some bacterial resistance. However, systematic literature review showed these to be at a lower evidence because of the heterogeneity of the methods used in the each of the studies included in the literature review. And in one studies, they look into the impact of removing automatic stop orders in their facilities. So, and then they compare the days of therapy before the removal of automatic stop orders and after removal of automatic stop orders. And what they found out is automatic stop orders able to reduce days of therapy significantly as compared to removing the stop orders. However, they also found there is a risk of unintentional missed day of therapy. So according to the authors, these situations or these issues need to be considered when we want to do automatic stop orders intervention. And delayed prescribings. This is studies done as on a meta-analysis of RCTs and observational studies in the community level at the primary care level among patients with respiratory tract infections. And they found that in patients with a delayed prescribing, they are more likely to have a slightly longer symptom durations. However, it has fewer complications that resulting in hospitalization when compared to the immediate antibiotics or no antibiotics given. So once we do the interventions, we need to measure the outcomes to ensure the efficacy and to ensure whether there is any limitations or there is any loopholes that need to be corrected. Right. So there are three outcome measurements. So outcome measures, process measures, and other measures. So outcome measures essential to study antibiotic prescribing and use over time. And usually it will use either surveillance, point prevalence studies, or audit data. And some of the indicators include defined daily dose per 100 or 1,000 patient days, DDD per admissions, days of therapy per 1,000 patient days. They also can look into patients' outcomes in terms of the symptoms-wise, in terms of the antibiotics use, and etc. Then also you can use a microbiology outcomes in terms of the eradications of the organisms involved. Whereas process measure is a measurement of improvement. So indicators may include compliance or adherence to guidelines, indication documented in the patient's record, the length of therapy, the de-escalations interventions done, and IV to oral switch conducted in the process. For other measures, is just done to ensure those interventions will not cause any unintended consequences. For example, indicators like mortality and the length of stay. So in conclusions, antimicrobial stewardship program offers multiple strategies which are flexible enough and have been proven to be effective in improving antibiotic use. So each healthcare facilities, if they have a good commitment to antimicrobial stewardship program, they can choose which of the plans that they can start first and which one they can start later, which one they require more facilities or more tools to conduct the activities. However, as I mentioned just now, to ensure the efficacy of this program, of these strategies, leadership commitment and vigilant teams are needed. So this is to ensure all activities plan can be conducted successfully and hopefully it will lead to the downtrend of the antimicrobial prescriptions and also antimicrobial resistance. With that, I'll thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mohamed Noor, for giving us such an informative presentation. So, ladies and gentlemen, now come to the question and answer session. Okay, I would like to have question from the participant. Please raise hand if you would like to ask. you may click the raise hand in the Zoom. Okay, maybe to start our discussion, Professor LaPlante, would you like explain in more detail about the strategies to combat antibiotic resistance, as you inform us that there are still many cases of that?
Yes, thank you for the question. It's very common. I think it depends on our setting. In the outpatient setting, one problem we have is a lot of our patients are requesting antibiotics when they aren't feeling well, and they will go to the providers and they will ask if they have a cold or a cough and they want to get back to work or care for someone. What we try to teach our providers is to have a conversation with their patients and ask open-ended questions on why you would want the antibiotic. And something that's been effective here in the United States, I don't know if this resonates in your community, is that people are more and more interested in the microbiome and maintaining a healthy gut. And healthy flora, and they know that if they use an antibiotic, you can really alter and go into dysbiosis with your microbiome. We obviously don't use those words with our patients, but to share that taking an antibiotic can alter your microbiome, and that those conversations have been effective with people here. So really, sharing with your patients that antibiotics are not benign. They do have side effects, and we really only want to use them when absolutely necessary.
Oh, okay, very nice. And what do you think about the benefit of this antibiotic for the COVID-19 actually? Is it useful or important for the patient, or maybe you have any suggestion, Professor Kerry?
Yes, and just so I understand, if patients are, I have to lower this, requesting antibiotics for COVID-19, is that your question? Yes. I think it goes back to education and sharing with our patients that we don't want to do harm. And this is a virus, and antibiotics do not treat viruses, and we want you to get better, and to give them supportive care. There's ibuprofen and acetaminophen, get their rest, take their vitamins and take care of themselves, and antibiotics are not going to help.
Okay, thank you. And how about in Malaysia, Dr. Noor, about this experience about the antibiotics for the COVID-19?
Okay, we also have cases or report of using antibiotics, but as far as I know of, it's similar to the one in US as well. So most of the time we have a good AMS team that really look into the use of antibiotics during the COVID-19. Yeah.
Very good. Okay, maybe from the audience, or maybe Dr. Saepudin. He's the head of the Department of Pharmacy and also study about the antibiotics. Maybe you can join in our conversation. Pak Saepudin, please join with us. Okay, until we wait for Pak Saepudin to join with us. How about the education that we have to engage to maybe for the physician or the nurse or even the patient or their family, because antibiotic is quite common as a medication to use when you have a fever or everything like that, and how to educate more for the patient. Thank you. Maybe Professor LaPlante first, do you have any suggestion?
We do. In Rhode Island, we try to be really careful and first do education to the physicians, to the doctors, and then to the nurses and the patients last. And we chose that approach is because we didn't want to target messaging to the patients without the physicians having that knowledge first. So we were intentional in starting with our physicians that see a lot of patients and making sure they knew that we were going to do that, and we supported them. Because when we talk to our physicians, a lot of times they say, I know that my patient doesn't need an antibiotic, it's a virus and it won't be helpful. But my patients demand it and I want to help them. So we were very intentional in educating our physicians and our providers before the patients. So by the time we got to the patients, everyone knew and felt supported.
Oh, okay. And Dr. Noor, you mentioned about the education. Maybe you can tell us more about the education practice as a strategist to combat this antibiotic resistance.
Okay, I do agree with Dr. LaPlante just now. Even in Malaysia, especially in general practitioner side, even when patients come in, they always prefer to have antibiotics.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's I think it's common worldwide, not only in Malaysia. So yeah. So I think again, in terms of educations, we need to educate the physicians on which illnesses that can be treated with antibiotics, and which antibiotics should be selected for certain kind of infections, right? I know there's some barriers, especially in hospitals, and whereby most of the seniors physicians, they are more they're more comfortable with their experiences. So they are used to it, using the antibiotics. So they might be a bit hesitant. But I think education need to be continuous. So in order for you to change the behavior of certain individuals, so it's not as easy as one education and you can change their perceptions and their behaviors. So it requires multiple education sessions, maybe in terms of maybe getting somebody with experience, maybe somebody with the same level with them to give more information on the antimicrobial use, antimicrobial stewardship program, so that they are more willing to join and more willing to try, and hopefully by doing so they will see the benefit of conducting this AMS program.
Romi, could you hear me?
Oh, yes, we can hear you, Pak Saepudin. Nice to have you to join with us.
Sorry, because my microphone was not working before. So thank you very much for this great opportunity for me to ask a question for both speakers. So we know that one of strategy that is recommended to tackle antimicrobial resistance is antibiotic cycling. Maybe Professor Kaplan and Dr. Mohamed Noor, I'm sure already familiar with this term, with this strategy. So maybe could you please, Professor Kaplan and Dr. Mohamed Noor, explain to us how effective this strategy from your experiences, or maybe from your practice in your country to delay, to postpone, or maybe even to combat this antibiotic resistance. Thank you.
Do you want me to go first?
Okay,
Yes, Professor, you may answer.
Thank you. I think that's such an excellent question, because when you think about antibiotic cycling and moving through different types of antibiotics, you hope that that would decrease the pressure and give some of the bacteria time to respond. I know that they looked at that, and from a high level standpoint, they haven't noticed that that makes a significant difference in the literature, but I still think, you know, a really important question, and perhaps not enough research has been done. But in theory, I think it's a great idea. And if I may just ask a question back, if that is okay, you know, do you have those same concerns with patients having cold and flu and requesting antibiotic? Is that very common?
Yes, they're quite common.
Yeah. I think it's quite common in Indonesia as well for that.
Yeah, but actually our government, Indonesian government already implemented like a policy about how to limit prescription level, antibiotic prescription level for this kind of cases, mild cases in at least in our primary health cares. So every month, all public primary health cares in Indonesia should make a report on this antibiotic prescription. And it will become like an indicator to evaluate the performance of the primary health care. This is in our environment. Thank you.
That's fantastic.
That's good. Yeah. But for us, because most of the usually patient with common cold and flu, they will go to GPs. So at the moment we don't have that kind of how to say, intervention by the government in terms of they have to give periodically give the how to say, the prescriptions and see how they prescribe the antibiotics. So we don't have that at the moment in Malaysia. But yeah, it's a good idea.
Yeah, what we've done here in the States too, in a lot of physicians' offices, when you would go in before you see them, there would be a sign saying, "We support appropriate antibiotic use," so the patients know right when they come in that it's communicated that we only will prescribe an antibiotic when we think it's safe and necessary. So patients already know before they go into the office and see the provider.
Okay, and we have a question from the audience, Professor LaPlante and Dr. Noor. And the first question is from Ucha Lestari. Has there been any drug interaction between antibiotics and other drugs during the pandemic COVID? Yes, maybe you may explain to Ucha Lestari and for all of us here. Professor LaPlante.
Yes, thank you. So have there been any drug interactions between antibiotics and other drugs? So what came to mind for me is we have the new antivirals for COVID, which is Paxlovid, which is a ritonavir boosted antiviral. And because, as everyone here knows, it's a strong cytochrome P450 CYP4 inhibitor, there are a lot of drug interactions with that and limits the use. In my opinion, for the patients who need it most, because it's more of the older adults who are on a lot of statins or multiple medications, that we can see those drug-drug interactions. So we always have to go online and check the drug-drug interactions for our patients before we prescribe them.
Any reported case, the worst case about this drug interaction in the US or maybe in Malaysia?
Great question. I haven't seen them with any harm. It's a short treatment, but I think it's a great question. And to my knowledge, I just haven't seen the literature on that. I'd be interested about Malaysia.
Yes, as far as I know, we don't have that kind of data yet. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we are still not sure about that.
Yeah. Go to the next question from Anissa Futria here. That how about the side effect, especially for comorbid patient that has been treated with antibiotics and other drugs? Maybe, Professor LaPlante, you have any information about this?
Yes, I really like this question because, you know, an area of my research is Clostridium difficile infections, C. diff infections, and that is probably the biggest downside of overall antibiotic use is that you'll give a patient an antibiotic and then we'll disrupt the dysbiosis in the microbiome. And if the patient encounters C. diff, they can end up with a really serious C. diff infection. We have a patient today, that's exactly what happened. He's older, he's 80, he's very, very sick already. And we just found out he came down with C. diff, a very virulent C. diff. And we were talking through how to treat him today because we know that his chances of survival are not going to be good. And questioning when he got that antibiotic before, did he even need it? So yes, a very important side effect is C. diff infection.
Have you have any information about this? How about the very severe patient that they have antibiotics and also they get the immunoglobulin, for example, like that? Any drug interaction, or maybe because any control about that, about the drug medication?
Yeah, that's a great question. From a side effect, to my knowledge, I'm not aware of any, but I'm sure there's people much smarter than me in this audience that would be probably more comfortable answering about the drug interaction. But clinically, I can't think of anything right now.
Okay, and how about you, Dr. Noor? About the side effect or maybe drug interaction that you may have information about this for our audience.
So, but for drug interaction, then we have to look at what kind of drugs that patient are taking at the moment. So and then we can see whether there is actually any interaction. And comorbidity maybe in terms like renal because of the excretion impairment, and that may also predispose patient to the side effects.
Uche and Anissa, you may join with us in a direct speak if you would like to ask further to our speaker.
Thank you, Bu Rohmi. It's very interesting that Professor LaPlante said about the microbiome, because we know that is very important for avoid some infection disease by looking at also about the microbiome factor. So how far is the effect of using antibiotic during for the patient, especially in COVID-19 patient, for their microbiome? And I mean, like, if we make comparison, is it better to not use antibiotic, or we just depend on our immune system and also our microbiome that we already have in our body? What do you think about this?
Yeah, I think it's such a thoughtful question and an important one. You know, as you know, we don't know what to do. If I could be basic, I know that, you know, we, when we brush our teeth, sometimes our gums bleed and the bacteria in our mouth get in our bloodstream. When we cut ourselves, the bacteria on our skin can get in our bloodstream. And when that bacteria is like 10 to the 2 or 10 to the 3 colony forming units per ml, like 100 or 1,000, our immune system can come in and take over, especially if we're healthy and we don't have any comorbidities. Same with a urinary tract infection. But once that inocula of that bacteria gets very high, if we are immune suppressed or on other medications, usually right around 10 to the 6 colony forming units per ml is too much for our immune system to handle. And that's when we do need some help from antibiotics. But a very thoughtful question and really important. And where is that line on when you need to treat and when you need to allow the immune system to take over?
Thank you, Professor and Anissa. Do you have still any question?
So maybe it also depends about how far that we can diagnose the several of the infection, right? Maybe to like yeah, continue about the treatment, Professor. We need a good system and also how to diagnose how severe the illness that we have if we got the infection.
Absolutely. Diagnostics are key, and I don't know how they are across the globe, but you know, in a perfect world, we would go into every physician's office, and if we think we have a cold, we can give a sputum sample and show that patient immediately to say, look, this is caused by this virus, or this is caused by this bacteria. That would be my wish for the globe, is that everyone had access to that and everyone could use it, and we could show our patients that you have a virus and you don't need this, or you have this bacteria with this resistance, and we could just do a much better job immediately caring for our patients.
Very true. Okay. Any further discussion from Anissa?
Thank you, Bu Rohmi. It's really clear for me.
Thank you very much, Professor LaPlante and Dr. Noor, and also the audience. Any further question from the floor? Okay, I think this is the end of our session, Professor LaPlante and Dr. Mohamed Noor. But before we close this session, the committee will give a certificate of appreciation to the panelists. Please. Okay, thank you very much for Professor Dr. Kerry LaPlante to join with us in this conference, and I hope we can see you again in the next occasion.
Thank you so very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Dr. Dzul, Azri, Mohamed Noor as well. I hope we still have this interesting talk during this session. Thank you very much for both of the speakers.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Yes. Please give a big round of applause to Dr. Dzul, Azri, Mohamed Noor, and Professor LaPlante. Thank you very much. And also, thank you to the audience, to all participants for your active participation panelly. I think this is all for our session. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Kerry and Dr. Dzul for the remarkable presentation, and Dr. Rohmi as our moderator for the plenary lectures. After this, we will have break for about 1 hour, and we would like to ask you to join the room again at 12:30. And after that, we will have the poster presentations and also the symposium that also will be divided into 3 breakout rooms. And for the attendance process will be done after the break session. Please keep active because we will have the door prize session at the end of the conference.
Don't leave your mass spec in the past. The thermoscientific Orbitrap Explorus 120 mass spectrometer. Easy to set up your method. Accurate. And reliable.
Therapeutic proteins, such as antibodies, are large complex molecules that selectively bind to sites on receptors or antigens. These proteins are comprised of long, folded amino acid chains. How the amino acid chains are folded have a significant effect on which amino acids are at the surface of the molecule in its three-dimensional structure. Consequently, the 3D structure is critical to how the molecule interacts with other proteins, receptors, or antigens. We can study the 3D or higher order structure of a protein using hydrogen-deuterium exchange (HDX) mass spectrometry. Deuterium from heavy water, also called D2O, undergoes a chemical exchange type reaction in which covalently bonded hydrogen atoms are replaced by deuterium atoms without any catalyst, simply by dissolving the protein in heavy water. This is a time-dependent reaction. Consequently, hydrogen atoms exposed on the surface of the protein exchange first. Sections of the protein that have exchanged hydrogen for deuterium will encounter a mass shift, due to deuterium atoms being heavier than hydrogen by about 1 Dalton. We can sample the reaction at different time points, and with that, follow the kinetics of the exchange reaction. The analysis by mass spectrometry is performed on the peptide level that requires the digestion of the protein of interest into peptides. We are able to analyze the peptides before and after labeling. The labeled and unlabeled peptides will be physicochemically identical and will separate at the same time chromatographically. However, when we use high-resolution accurate mass spectrometry, we can detect the mass shift of the deuterium-labeled peptide. This allows the scientist to determine the spatial location of the peptide. This technique enables important studies into drug structure, epitope mapping, and biosimilarity. HDX-MS systems require robust software control, exceptional reproducibility, advanced high-resolution MS capabilities, powerful data processing tools, and expert support. The clever scientists at Thermo Fisher Scientific have a solution. The Thermo Scientific HDX LC-MS workflow brings together exceptional technologies to deliver maximum flexibility and performance. Sample preparation and labeling steps are performed using the HDX PAL Auto Sampler from Leap Technologies. All of the features are available through software control that integrates seamlessly with Thermo Scientific Excalibur software. Exceptional flow precision is delivered using the Thermo Scientific Ultimate NCS 3500 RS-LC system, which combines a binary high-pressure gradient pump and a ternary low-pressure microloading pump for absolute experimental control. The HDX PAL and LC modules integrate with any Thermo Scientific Orbitrap-based mass spectrometry system, allowing for a single software control of the entire LC-MS system, giving you choice in experimental features whilst meeting a range of budgets. Flexible software tools are provided which include Biopharma Finder software for peptide mapping, and HD Examiner from Sierra Analytics for interpretation and visualization of deuterium uptake. The Thermo Scientific HDX LC-MS workflow is easy to use, delivers exceptional reproducibility, is future-proof, full-featured and flexible, has a single software control for the LC-MS system, and has expert global technical support.
Jogja itu panas ya. Tapi meskipun panas ya, Jogja itu nggak kayak panas di kampung kita.
Iya, di kampung kita itu udah sepi parah. Gak ada cewek-ceweknya.
Cewek cantik-cantik. Adem pokoknya kalau.
Iya, wah.
Ya udah fotoin aku lah.
Oke, siap.
Kenapa? Pakai kamera dong, nggak usah pakai
iya.
Dibuka, jangan lupa.
Oh iya, siap. Pertama. Nggak bisa?
Nggak ada baterainya mungkin.
Iya, Boh.
Cek aja dulu. Lah, kok nggak ada baterainya?
Nggak tahu.
Kan kamu udah bilang siapin baterainya, kameranya semua.
Ini kan kameramu tadi. Aku kira kamu udah nyiapin.
Ya kan, aku udah masak di kamu cuma nyiapin.
Gimana dong?
Ya terus gimana?
Gimana ya?
Tenang, anak muda. Semua masalah pasti ada solusinya. Saya Kang Rejo, pakar multimedia. Ada masalah apa?
Kameranya loh.
Baterainya
nggak ada baterainya.
Minggir. Coba lihat. Keluarin apa? Buka Google. Tulis sewa kamera Jogja. Enter. Nah, yang ini.
Oh ini, ya.
Alat yang kalian cari ada di sini. Udah mulai malam. Saya tunggu di situ.
Ini di sini loh.
Nanti sih, ya udah. Kita udah dapat kameranya. Dadanya kita berangkat.
Ayo.
Tuh, udah sampai kita.
Semuanya itu.
Iya kan, FM rental.
Oh iya.
Mas, selamat malam, mari silakan Kak. Bisa kami bantu? Mau sewa kamera?
Welcome back, and I hope that all of you guys have a good break. And after this, we are going to have the symposium session, which will be 3 symposiums with 3 different topics. The first topic is the chronic disease management during COVID-19 pandemic. And the second one is the update on discovery of anti-infective agents and COVID-19. And the third one is pharmacy educations during COVID-19 outbreak. You can choose which break rooms that you want to choose. And the committee have already opened the 3 break rooms. Okay, maybe participants, you can go to the break rooms that you want to choose. Thank you. Now we come to the main, most interesting part of this conference, which is the door prize session. For picking who is the winner, we are going to play a little bit through the quizzes website. Later on, the committee will send the link into your Zoom chat. And please participate. We will choose 5 winners who will answer the fastest. And also there will be 5 questions for these games. So, let us start. Okay. Have all of the participants got the link already? Okay, we may start. Jump into the first questions. are the 5 lucky winners? So we are going to pick from the top 5. The top 5 participants who can get the correct and the fastest answers. Okay, please pay attention to those names. Okay. For those lucky winners, later on will be contacted by the committee to get the special door prize, which is the e-wallet. Okay, now we are going to move to the next agenda, which is the announcement of the best oral and poster presenter of this conference that will be announced by the Dean of Faculty of Mathematics and Natural Science, Universitas Islam Indonesia, who will also officially close this conference by his closing remarks. To Professor Dr. Rianto SPDS M.Sc, the screen is yours.
The next session is the announce of best oral and poster presenter on Icprp 2022. The committee has selected for the best oral and poster presenter. Okay, the best poster presenter is Gania Sakira Saiful. Okay, congratulations to winner. And then best oral presenter is the first Harwoko. Okay, good luck. And then the second Wildan Khairi Muhtadi. Okay, congratulations to all winner. Okay, the next session is closing ceremony. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Alhamdulillah, all agenda in this conference has been complete and finished. International Pharmaceutical Research and Practice Icprp 2020 and 2022 has been successful, thanks to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. On this session, I say thank you very much to keynote speakers, Professor Dr. Laksono Trisnantoro M.Sc, and then all invited speakers, Professor Dr. Kerry, Dr. Dzul Azri Mohamed. This is a special Professor Patrick and Dr. Hana Morissey from Wolverhampton University, UK, still join in Zoom until closing ceremony. Thank you. And then thank you to Pak Saepudin, Ph.D, Dr. Hadi Kuncoro, Dr. Azri Dr. Mohamed Haddad, Dr. Juliana, Profesor Nasrul Matoni, Ibu Suci Hanifah Ph.D. Thank because have shared knowledge to all participants. And then thank you to presenter, oral and poster, and all participants have active discussion in this conference. And then thanks a lot to Chairman of Icprp 2022, Bapak Dr. Hatta Prabowo, has been very good manage this conference, and all committee from Pharmacy Department, Faculty of Mathematics and Natural Science, University Islam Indonesia. This conference is very good because relevant with the new condition, especially in Indonesia. The effective of COVID-19 on the quality of education, research, and practice in the pharmacy department. We can take lesson learned from the conference to improve the quality of education in the pharmacy department. Finally, see you next the Icprp agenda. Inshallah will be held with full offline in Yogyakarta. See you next time in Yogyakarta, Indonesia. Best regard from me and all committee. And wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you so much, Professor Rianto, for the heartwarming remarks. And that is the end of the 4th International Conference on Pharmaceutical Research and Practice 2022. I would like to say thank you for all of the invited speakers, participants, and also the committee of this conference. And see you again on the next Icprp. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Professor Bol, Hana.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
See you very soon.
See you.